Sustainability is a bit of a tough thing, especially in the coffee industry. I struggle with it, and I know many other people do. But today's guest, Nick Percy, outlines how we can take a different approach to make better impacts on the environment and benefit our industry as a whole. Make sure you tune in and enjoy.
Well, welcome into the podcast. Back to
It's Just Coffee.
I'm Rohan Cook.
And I'm Kirk Pearson.
And who do we have with us today, Kirk?
We have the Sustainability Manager for the Nomad Coffee Group and DKL. Did I get that right?
The Minor DKL Food
Minor DKL. Nick Percy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having the dress code right. We're all wearing green.
Yeah, well,
Phone ahead.
we all thought sustainability and coffee, we'll all wear green, and, you know, it's just worked out brilliantly.
I put no planning
Yeah.
with that all.
So the title of today's episode is Sustainability and Coffee, I would say. So hence why we asked Nick on board. Nick and I actually had a great day yesterday. So basically we had a pre-interview meeting online over Zoom, and it was all going really well. And basically we're discussing an enormous big roastery that you guys operate as well. And I thought to myself, I would love to see this. And I just off the hook asked, Nick, can I come with you? And he's just like, sure. So yesterday it was Work with Nick Percy Day, or Nick Percy's Bring Kirk to Work Day. And we got to go check out the roastery. So that was an unbelievably cool experience. So thank you in advance for that. That was awesome.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's going to be fun diving into that and hearing a bit more, because it is otherworldly. It's so cool. And it's very different to the type of level of coffee that we're working at. So I'm very excited to dive into that. Now, Kirk, I've got the very serious question of, did you manage to steal anything while you're there? Was there any cool takeaways that you...
Well, I'm not going to say that in front of Nick.
Earmuffs.
Gosh.
If there was one thing that you could have stolen, what would it be? Was there anything that just like blew you away?
If I could have, the roaster that's the size of a house.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I could have quickly deconstructed that and taken it with me. Wasn't able to do it. So yeah, if I could have, that's what I would have taken.
Size of the house.
Size of a house.
Wow.
Do you remember the little thing I had you sign and the little picture of you that I have
Oh,
on
God.
there?
Oh yeah, the
That's
NDA.
why we do that.
All right. Well, we start off the coffee, the It's Just Coffee podcast with some coffee news. So I'm going to get started with some news. If you okay with that, we're ready to roll.
I love news.
Liam. Now, I've actually got a bit of breaking news here.
Oh, breaking.
Bit of breaking news. Prominent coffee influencer Rohan Cook was arrested and jailed for tax fraud recently.
Mm-hmm. Look, I didn't want this getting out into the world, but I guess the cat's out of the bag.
Liam, I told you that was supposed to be for next year. He gets jailed for that next year.
Oh.
Don't ask me how I know that. Illuminati confirmed.
Is this predicting the future? You're putting it out there that by next year I'm going to be arrested for tax fraud.
I've seen things.
Yeah, well, there's a very real possibility of that.
But in actual news, so this is on topic, on brand for this podcast. We spoke about a few months ago coffee grounds being used to make effective concrete. So coffee concrete shortlisted for National Research Impact Award. So University of Australia has shortlisted RMIT University's coffee concrete innovators for the upcoming 2024 Shaping Australia Awards in the problem solver category. Your reaction to that? I think that's a wonderful program and a great use of used coffee grounds.
Yeah, I think it's unbelievable. I'm excited to see what it looked like. And also, what does it smell like? Imagine if you're just in a little concrete block and you're just getting the aromas of coffee drifting through the air. That'd be amazing.
You know who we should ask? Freeground.
Freeground. They're involved in the program?
Yep. So our coffee grounds go to that project.
Yeah, right.
That's
Same
what
here.
they tell me, I believe.
I'm sure we have a lot less coffee grounds that are going to that project than you, but some of our coffee grounds are going to that project.
There we go.
But can you elaborate on, you went and did something after we parted ways yesterday. If you don't mind off the top of the podcast, can you say what you were going to do with the...
I can sort of say.
Yeah.
Interesting. So it's a facility.
Just come close to the mic.
A little bit closer.
Yeah,
It's a facility out in the West where effectively they're using a form of animal to break down food into both fertilizer and feed for animals as well, which is really cool. So one of those really innovative opportunities to take what is a waste product and a really low value waste product and then turn it into something that people can sell, which is kind of the key point of circularity, which gets missed.
Yeah, absolutely.
I found that really fascinating, and coffee grounds can be used in that as part of the food waste. So
coffee grounds, coffee chaff, there was compostable plastic as well there, food. Smelled gross.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Smelled really gross.
What's the difference with, now there's difference between unused grounds and used grounds, right, with what you can do with them. Is there a difference, like with having the caffeine and that kind of stuff in them?
Yeah, it's just got more in it, right? So when coffee's brewed, you lose a lot of the acids and sugars and stuff that's in it. That'd be the real difference.
Yeah. So can you just normally compost your coffee beans, like if they're not, if they haven't been extracted?
Yes. Composting is a bit of a science, though. So you need to get the balance right. You want to make sure you don't have too much coffee or not enough green matter. When I say green matter, I mean like sticks and leaves and those sorts of things.
You're going to have some jacked up bees out there in the garden, just high on caffeine, loving life.
Maggots.
Maggots. Maybe have some jacked up maggots.
Yeah.
I hate those jacked up maggots. They cause me so much problems. Many problems.
You get fermentation in compost, which smells like fermented compost.
Oh, yum. Kombucha.
It's called Bokashi.
Oh, that sounds cool. It sounds like a cool rapper or something that's coming up in the world.
Well, let's get into the podcast. Rohan, I believe you had round one for Nick, Percy. Ding, ding, ding.
I mean, we're just got to start off with the main question. Can you explain to us what the Nomad Coffee Group is? Because I think it kind of encompasses a lot of things there.
Yeah. So the Nomad Coffee Group is a bunch of different brands. So it started with Veneziano coffee roasters. That's kind of the OG. We've also got the Coffee Hit, which fits under the same banner. Black Bag Roasters is one of the newer ones, which has come from our private label roasting and our sort of expansion of the bigger business. We've got Flight Coffee in the group over in New Zealand. We've also got Blendco, which is a new group which is regionally based. So they operate out of places like Geelong and Lisero in New South Wales.
Massive. That's huge.
Lisero, that's near my hometown.
Is it?
Central Coast, yeah. Great part of the world. But what does your job kind of entail? So you're the group sustainability manager for Minor DKL and Nomad Coffee Group. So explain to us like what you're kind of doing on the day-to-day.
Yeah, well, day-to-day changes, which is part of the fun.
Sometimes it's taking coffee podcasters to work with you. Sometimes
Yes. Sometimes it's diving in bins. That happens. So certainly bins is something I'm pretty passionate about. Waste.
Mm-hmm.
Is that to do with your job or just extra curricular activity?
Depends on the day. No, so I think waste management and appropriate waste management is something I'm really passionate about and something that you only really understand if you get your hands dirty, so to speak. But what do I do? So I look after two main groups. So there's the Nomad Coffee Group and there's also the Minor DKL Food Group, which holds such brands as the Coffee Club, if you're familiar with it.
Mm-hmm. Very familiar.
So with that covers a bunch of different topics from our emissions reporting and the things that we need to report up to our various boards and our parent company to our waste management practices. I work really closely with both supply chain teams on kind of what the goals are around packaging, around modern slavery, not having modern slavery is the kind of goal there.
Yeah.
To doing community engagement events. So it's a really kind of broad, all-encompassing role which covers everything that is roughly sustainability.
And this is something that you've kind of evolved into as well, right? You started off your career in coffee specifically, not necessarily trained in, environmental economics or in environmental science in any way.
Yeah, so coffee tragic. I've been in coffee for nearly 20 years, showing my age. And I fell into it. So it was an opportunity that came up. We had a bunch of, goals and projects and things we wanted to do at Nomad, and we didn't have anyone to do it. So the opportunity came towards me to say, hey, do you want to do it? And that came from me talking about things like compost with a level of passion, or packaging, or things that most people find pretty boring. I geek out about.
Right. So it kind of started when? Was this like 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah, so just after COVID.
Yeah.
That's kind of when we had time, I think. We had nothing else to do. We couldn't go to the pub.
Yeah.
Had time to think about what we wanted to do and why. We had a committee or a sustainability committee within the group, and we had a list of a bunch of things we wanted to do, like becoming B-Corp and carbon neutral. And again, we just didn't have the resourcing to move any further to it. But it's not something new to the business or the group. It was kind of one of the reasons why I came there in the first place, because there's been a focus on everything from internal people to people in the coffee supply chain to our local communities. Like it's a really deep down intrinsic part of the business.
Yeah, and I think this is something that will actually be quite enlightening to our listeners, right? A lot of people, myself, I'll speak for myself and maybe some of the listeners, a lot of people are in the sort of specialty bubble, and I think you and I were sort of chatting about previously yesterday, is that there's a lot more to coffee outside the specialty bubble. Like the industry is so much bigger than just specialty, which I think a lot of the listeners would kind of be a part of right now. And I find it fascinating to learn about big coffee and fascinating having these chats with you. And we'll get into how sort of your business operates throughout the podcast. But, things like, and talking about your job yesterday, like some of the targeting that you've got for your emissions, I found that quite interesting. Can you kind of elaborate how you set goals around that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of industry recognised frameworks, not coffee industry specific, but things like the Paris Agreement, which is designed to keep global warming was supposed to be below 1.5. We stuffed that up already. But there's a bunch of frameworks that exist that we kind of aligned ourselves with. Really just comes down to, I suppose, measuring what you do initially. That's your baseline. So you set that from our emissions standpoint. And then we chose to reduce that. We made that conscious decision. We don't need to. There's no requirement for a business our size. There's no legislation. There's nothing forcing our hand to do this. But we're passionate about it. We're very aware of the impact that coffee or the global warming will have to coffee. If I'm sure we've heard the commentary around about half of coffee that's grown right now, or the land that's used is at risk. That's a really common thing to be thrown around. So we took that as our need or our duty to actually do something in our space and make our changes, small as they may be, if you look at the global scale of things.
Yeah, what's the change that's happening again? So it's basically like at the moment, is it like everything near the equator is kind of where coffee is grown, but that's getting too hot. So now it's like moving further south in like where coffee can be grown?
Yeah, that and altitude and just various areas. So there's conversations, having with farmers where they're seeing changes year on year in terms of where they're growing. So that's going to move and that's going to shift, which
that is wild when you think about those giant areas with so many farms that they could like all get knocked out or even start producing less quality, all those sides of things. And it's this balance between like us doing the right thing of what you're doing with, trying to be more eco-friendly, stop emissions, stop all that kind of stuff. And then you're seeing also the other side. It's like this race between science where they're like, can we genetically modify crops to withstand these heats or to be more resistant or do that? So it's a crazy time we're going through and we're worried about, price of coffee now. But buckle in, people. It's coming for you. The price.
Well, there's a few interesting angles to that because you mentioned genetically modifying. We've cultivated in the industry varietals that do grow better in sort of drought-prone conditions, like SL28, which stands for Scott's Labs 28 and 34, commonly grown in Kenya, commonly grown in Costa Rica.
Ooh, so I can't wait to get an RC 89, the Rohan Cook 89. But there are varietals.
But there are some quite robust varietals that have been cultivated that people kind of regularly drink that they don't know about. That is, would you call that genetically modified? I'm not sure. I suppose it's cultivated in some sort of way.
Yeah, it is, right? I mean, it's for a purpose. It's been modified. But I think what's really interesting, I was thinking about this morning, is that yes, we're going to have varietals that will grow and in different locations, but what's there now? Like, are we going to have more deforestation? Are we going to reduce our food bowls? Like what? No, that's got to go somewhere.
On that topic, you mentioned deforestation. We actually sort of spoke about last week how the EU's deforestation regulation that would have been imposed on coffee producers has been delayed by a year. What's your reaction to that? And is there anything you can inform our listeners on about that?
I haven't looked into that because it's only required if you supply coffee into the EU. So it's on my list of things to look into and to understand.
Is deforestation a big are coffee producers responsible for a lot of it?
Some are, some aren't. I think that's to answer with a really political answer is that it depends on the farmer, it depends on the group.
I mean, this is a good follow-up from what we were talking about on last week's episode. We were chatting about the rules of deforestation that have been coming in. We were trying to kind of deep dive into both sides of it because you have we have areas in the world where it's like they're getting stopped from being able to sell their coffee because they can't verify if they're deforesting or not. And then there's some of them that aren't, and there's probably some that are. So it'd be interesting to know, is a big part of it coming from that? And, do those regulations need to be there and as strict as they are?
I would say yes, but it also raises the barrier for some farmers as well. So if you look at anything in this sort of space, there's a lot of different challenges, from things that could be really good for the environment, but not so good for the people. So it's how do you balance those things? And I don't know. I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
I leave that to, people that are smarter in this space than I am.
Yeah. And I also wanted to ask, so I hear from a little birdie that you guys are aiming to get B certified or B Corp certified.
We already are.
We already are. Sorry. Catching up on all the information here. Already B Corp certified. How do you undertake that? Why are you taking on that role and why do you think it's important?
Again, it's one of those things that we wanted to do many, many years ago before it became my job. I think we saw it as not so much we want to do good things. It's a third-party recognition of the good things that we've always done as a business. And it did push us in some different directions and push us to do things better as well. But I think it's down to wanting some recognition for what we do, as well as positioning ourselves as front runners in the industry in this sort of space, certainly in the bigger industry space, as well as our people are really important to us. There's a lot of us. I've been there for nearly 7 years. There's people that have been there for nearly 20 years. That doesn't happen by accident. So it allows us to not only attract really great people into our business, but keep the people we already have, because that's super important to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think have you found that that brings in a lot of business that people are looking through that? Or do you think it's just more of a mark that when you can talk about it, you're like, look, we're doing these great things? Because I think it's also important what you talked about, you're already doing the great things, but then sometimes it's nice to have this list of here are other ways. You're like, oh, great, that's something we should think about as well, and something we can push ourselves to better in our practices.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at taking a step back to what the B Corp certification is, there's a lot of questions. There's some 300 or 400 different questions, and no one has 100%, success rate. Like we scored, I think, in the 90s, low 90s. There's businesses out there with, 120 or more. But I had a point. I did have a point during this conversation. And it's completely gone.
It's slowly like a bee just drifted off into the wind. But it is great. Some of the things that you have to think about are so intense. I remember chatting with when we had Abby from Keep Cup on the pod, because they're B Corp certified. She was stating where it's I think 90-something, 96% or something like that of their carbon emissions or carbon footprint comes from people washing their cups. So it's also the afterlife that you have to think about. So when they have their carbon footprint check and you look at what their carbon footprint is, most of that, 90-something% of that, is just the afterlife of the product and going, oh, well, we have to account for every single person that buys one is going to wash it this many times in its life cycle. So then that's added to the carbon footprint. So it does really make you think about the problem in a very different way.
Yeah, especially when you've got a product. That's the concept of circularity or product stewardship.
Yeah.
So they have a big focus on that, as they should. They do some really great work and it's a great product. We have similar concerns and issues with our coffee products. It is built on, a convenience in terms of being able to sell coffee all across Australia and different parts of the world. But, it comes in what is fundamentally a soft plastic bag, which is it's a challenge.
What's the process like of becoming B Corp certified? Because my understanding of it is this, in economics, it's called triple bottom line accounting, where it's the financial, the social, environmental impact of what you do. So what's the process of becoming B Corp certified?
So, like with anything, it comes with a survey, a very long survey. They call it the impact assessment. So you start there and you basically measure all of the things that sit within your categories. So you mentioned things like your financial position, also your people, so how you treat your staff internally, how you perform in the environmental stage, even down to governance. So what is your board made up of? What are the I suppose the safety nets that are involved in running a business to make sure there's no dodgy or unethical stuff that happens behind the scenes.
You were saying to me that there's 5 pillars upon to become B Corp certified. Can you outlay what they are?
Yeah, so there's governance, there's customer, there is environment, there is community, and there's employees.
Yeah, and so you said there was 400 or so questions. Is it kind of Have you ever seen on the news when they prepare a submission to like host the Olympic Games in a country or the Soccer World Cup? There's just like boxes and boxes of documents. Is it kind of like that?
No, it's digital, but it is pages and pages. It's,
yeah, right.
It's something like 96 pages of information.
Yeah.
You don't have to prove all of it. They will pick and choose certain elements. They want you to display information and prove that you're doing what you say you're doing. But yeah, it's a really interesting way to look internally. Like you look within and see what the business is doing, see what exists already, see what you can better on, and see what you can celebrate.
So one thing we sort of spoke about yesterday was that you have some large clients that purchase large amounts of coffee. And I guess for anyone listening at home, they might have the question, well, how does a coffee company, a coffee roasting company, become B-Corp certified? Because there's probably the amount of gas that you use for one. So a lot of natural gas, that's a would you call that a fossil fuel sort of thing?
Yes.
And then so how is it that you can become B-Corp certified and still make a positive contribution?
It's not about being perfect, I think is the best way to answer that. Yes, we do use gas. Everyone in the coffee industry is using gas. There's no real opportunity to use something else. We're kind of pitching to that at the moment. But it's a case of how can you make positive impacts in other areas. So, we also use quite a lot of electricity. We've, that site you saw yesterday, that doesn't run on, sunshines and rainbows. It does have quite a large electricity bill as well. So we use green power. So we use renewable energy in all our facilities. That helps bring down your scope 2. Scope 1, which is your gas usage, amongst other things, is more problematic. But
what is some of the green energy you're using there?
So it's called green power. So that's a I don't want to say scheme because it sounds like it's bad, but it is a scheme. So you procure it from your energy provider. You can do it at home. You can do it here in this building if you so choose. And if for every kilowatt you buy of green power, they will then generate or procure 1 kilowatt hour of renewable energy from wind, solar, whatever it may be.
Oh, so it is from solar. So it is running on sunshine.
Liar! Gobby.
Yeah. That was all I was just leading up to this line joke. He's like, well, this is really eloquent answer. I'm like, just say solar.
So one thing, I guess this is a good segue into kind of what we did yesterday. So you obviously operate a huge roastery, supply clients like the Coffee Club, Aldi in Australia, so that's probably like a large size of your business. So there's a lot of logistics that go into operating such a thing. So we actually toured. I went and got a photo of the roaster, which we'll probably upload with the podcast, which is the roaster's the size of a house. Like, I shit you not, like a 2-story house. The logistics behind operating that kind of thing are just enormous. Can we just outlay some of that and, your role in setting all of that up and how, as much as you can, about how it operates?
Yeah, well, in terms of operating it day to day, I don't do much anymore. I look after the waste and I look after some of the structure behind that. But we have a team. We've got a really good team of people, not only on the floor operating it, but also our procurement and logistics teams that manage the demand of what coffee is going to the business. We have a demand planner. There's not too many coffee businesses in Melbourne that would have that job role. But it's challenging. We have got a finite amount of space. We've got enough racking for maybe a week and a half's worth of green coffee in there that we do need to leverage. So we have some really great partners that we work with to keep that flow of green product coming into the building, a couple of times a week.
So that, for listeners tuning in for the first time, is unroasted coffee, is green coffee. One thing that I found fascinating that we sort of spoke about in our pre-podcast interview was that you produce, I think, 1 million more kilos now than you did 2 or 3 years ago, but you actually use less gas. 1 million more kilos now than 3 or 4 years ago, and you use less gas. How does that work?
It was a win for me, a win for sustainability there. So it came with tech. So in investing in that Brambati, so a 600 kilo Brambati is the unit that you saw. And not only is it enormous, but it's also really efficient. So compared to our Diedrich 240, which is our second largest roaster, it uses 40% less gas. So it's got a higher volume of coffee that it pumps out, but the actual amount of gas being pumped into it at the same time through its eco afterburner and uses a recyc air as well, which is really good. It's phenomenal. So we've been able to effectively reduce what we call our carbon intensity, which is how much you emit per functional unit, so which is a kilo of coffee for us. We've halved that in 4 years.
Wow. And so, and this just goes to show the amount of science that there is in coffee roasting and how much more there is yet to discover. I'm sure there'll be a much better way to do it in the future.
And wait, I just want to get some of these numbers because I'm pretty stupid. So 600 kilo roaster, so 600 kilos at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And so like what are most roasters just using in like a little roastery?
Oh, I think a specialty roaster would consider a 60 kilo roaster.
Huge.
Pretty big.
Pretty big, yeah.
No,
And a lot of them are using smaller than that. So 600 kilos at a time. I'm assuming, and I could be wrong here because, again, I'm not very smart, that it would have to be the same process as a smaller roaster. So does it take, 15 minutes to do it, or does it take longer because of the scale?
No, it's that sort of 15, 16. It's very similar.
So it's what? So
2.4
that's 600
tons an hour sort of thing?
2.4 tons an hour. And how many hours is that roaster running a day?
12, 14.
Oh, my God.
Okay.
Oh, my God. That's a lot of coffee. I just work it out. It's like, that's about Golden Brown's coffee sales for the next 24 years all combined into like one thing.
Yeah, like 2.4 tons for a specialty roaster is very respectable. That's you've got a business there. But 2.4 tons an hour, that's just, it's mind-boggling stuff. And one thing that I kind of found interesting as well is like the silos that you store the coffee in before they reach the roaster. So it's all a great big automated process. So it's stored in these bins. It has an auger. Is it called an auger that effectively brings the beans to the roaster?
Well, it uses airflow to move the green coffee around the building. So, there is quite a lot of automation because if you've got a hand load, so we still do some hand loading in our Richmond micro roastery and our little 5 and 15 kilos. That's hand loaded. Easy to do when you're doing.
I like 5. How you call that a micro roastery now.
Well, it's our micro roastery.
Yeah.
Easy to load that in by hand.
Yeah.
Pretty hard. Like how many buckets of coffee would it take to load in 600 kilos?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of.
Few hours later.
Yeah. It's just totally fascinating stuff. And, I would have loved to have stayed there for hours and hours and hours. But yeah, just the sheer amount of coffee that you're roasting. And you were saying to me that it's also like it kind of heats up the air rather than the drum.
Yeah. So it's a perforated drum roaster. So it uses air, which is much easier to heat up because you effectively just use a big, it's almost like a jet. And it shoots the hot air into the drum, agitates it as a normal roaster would. But you don't have to heat up that big mass of metal like you do with, traditional smaller roasters.
Do you ever do some time as a coffee roaster? Do you ever roast coffee?
I've maybe done like 3 charges on a Loring, also another air roaster.
Yeah.
And a little bit of sample roasting.
Yeah, right.
I can make it brown. If it's going to taste good, I can't tell you.
One thing that I found interesting as well about this whole thing is it actually took 6 months for you guys to set the roaster up. So you had some guys come over from Italy. They had to spend 6 months here. I imagine that's probably like a fairly taxing on those guys' families sort of thing. And then for you to take all that time to commission it.
Mario was one of the guys from Brambida that came over. And he was saying that I think he hadn't seen a summer in 2 years because he'd been building roasters.
Wow.
Just missed it.
Yeah, right.
So, yes.
What were you going to say, Rohan?
I was just going to say, if you didn't know, Kirk's actually part Italian, so that might have been somebody's family that were coming over.
I recently discovered that I'm part Italian, and Rohan spends actually quite a bit of time denigrating my culture. It's disgusting, really, but...
I don't know. It took him 6 months to set up a roaster, so,
It's pretty big.
Oh, well, give me 2 days, I'm done. Easy.
This is kind of reminding me of that. Remember, we've been watching Better Call Saul lately. Remember when they're building the?
Wait, I'm only up to like season 2.
Okay, I won't.
No more spoilers.
Whoa. But if we're just going to stop on it for a second, we never chatted about it. Better Call Saul, man, what a show! So loved Breaking Bad, but Better Call Saul, the first few seasons has a bit more of that. One side of the story is like a bit more human and a bit more like to the core of what it's like to be a human. And then the other side goes into like more of the drug cartel stuff and diving into that. But it's a bit slower, but as a drama, what a show. Gets me going.
I've been watching The Penguin lately as well.
Oh yeah, how's that?
It's like a walking anxiety attack. You're just like, what's going to happen next? There's just so much drama in it all. It's quite crazy.
So they're calling from like episode 1. They're like, he's going to win all the awards. Like, are they coming at him? Do you reckon?
I don't know. It might be a bit fast paced. Like
right.
there's
not enough like heart.
Yeah, I don't know. Leo, were you going to say something just there?
No, I was just going to say we started watching the first episode last night. So good.
Yeah, it's
such a liar. Liam's trying to get away from his little etch boy like understanding. You were watching anime. Don't lie to us. I was watching cartoons.
There's no shame in that. It's kind of hard to believe that Colin Farrell's under that thing. You know,
under that big fat suit.
Done a tremendous job.
There's also been a lot of controversy about that as well.
Yeah,
because he's a skinny guy in a fat suit. Should be a fat actor. That's what they're saying.
Oh yeah, I mean, you dive into all these
hang on a second,
arguments here.
But what's that like trying to cast a fat actor? It's like you're going to someone, and what if they don't want to really be acknowledged as fat, and you say, "Hey, we're looking."
Then they don't come in for the role.
Yeah, but like, what's the ethics around that? I don't know. Like, if I think they've done a tremendous job, and he's doing it quite well. Just me personally.
I agree.
But back onto these. Sorry, were you going to say something on the sustainability stuff? I had a question for you about. What do you think we do well in coffee relating to sustainability, and what do you think we do poorly?
I think individually, lots of roasters care. Like, they give a shit. What we miss out on is that we don't work collectively at all. And it takes a lot more of us working together to actually make any difference to what we're seeing from an industry standpoint. We've all got different opinions and different ideas, and there's lots of businesses doing great things around their sourcing, around their environmental footprint, but it's all different. And so we're making different impacts which don't have a consolidated effort. I think that's probably the biggest one. Like to see us cooperate more.
Well, one thing that I think the society at large kind of sort of fails on relating to sustainability and climate change is that it's almost like an ideological or kind of religious thing these days. Like, you either believe in it or you don't. And, in Australia, we've had towards climate policy, it's been a bit of a political football since like 2009, I think. We just haven't had, and it's kind of affected us in the country with our electricity grid. So in ways that we probably didn't foresee, because politicians just can't get around it collectively.
But what level of people, what are I'd love to know what the actual numbers are of people who are just complete deniers. Because is one side of it really, it's is it that they're denying it or they just don't care? And they're like, whatever, I'm not changing the way that I'm living my life. Whatever, the world's changing. It's all normal. Because, I mean, it's pretty concrete that it's happening.
Well, one interesting angle to this is, and I think we've all spoken about this previously, maybe on separate conversations, but it's amazing how much culture and leadership kind of shapes this argument as well. To give you an example, I went to Sweden in 2016 or 17 or something, and at the end of every street, there's 8 different recycling bins, and you individually put each respective item in its respective recycling bin. And if you don't, and someone sees you like a neighbor or something, they'll execute you, or they'll probably just have a stern conversation like, "Hey, why are you putting it in that bin?" And here we can't even separate a used chip packet from a drink bottle.
Well, you don't need to recycle. That's the thing that blows my mind, is that there is nothing making a home, a business, or anyone actually recycle.
So, we do need to for the greater good, but you're not compelled to.
I recommend you do. I would encourage you to. But there's no legislation, there's no law, there's no requirement that makes you do any of this. All there is around legislation is that you can't put things like batteries in general waste. You can't put chemicals and nasty stuff, down those pipelines. But I don't have to recycle at home. I do.
Oh.
I do, fun fact.
Yeah, I do. Just so we're clear, the sustainability head does recycle. But this is just a little tidbit. I'm going to claim ignorance, and maybe everyone's going to call me stupid here. I knew there was the battery sides and all those things. I only just found out recently that you can't put light bulbs. I didn't know that. I didn't know you had to dispose of them. Did everyone else know that?
No, I didn't know that. But this...
I did, but it's my job. But
yeah. But, can you hit us with some of the things do you have a list off the top of your head of what you can and cannot put in the trash / recycling? Those things? So batteries, light bulbs,
anything electrical. So you shouldn't put a fridge in a skip, for instance.
Yep.
What else? Cleaning chemicals. Don't put them down your drain either.
Like what?
Like cleaning chemicals, like dishwashing detergent or anything that's a chemical, you shouldn't be putting straight in the bin.
Well, how do you wash
your dishes?
You can use it in that. I'm saying don't tip the bottle down.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So use it in the way it's intended.
Correct.
Not just
because there's a dilution. There's studies that have been done on what's safe, what's not. What else? Grease. You shouldn't put grease down the drain.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. And just going back onto this cultural thing, like let's do a comparison of your average 45-year-old dad from Sweden and your 45-year-old dad from, the outer suburbs of Melbourne. The 45-year-old dad from Sweden, his name's possibly Klaus, and just like the cultural norms in Sweden, like Klaus just recycles. Over here, he's got a VB stubby on a Friday night watching the AFL, and he's just lobbing cans in the bag. He's like, I can't be bothered recycling. That's kind of like this.
That's every Australian. We've just nailed it down.
But culturally, the same guy in each country, like, just has different philosophies around it, and that it's culture, two, it's leadership.
Yeah, and part of it is just the infrastructures and that are over there. Like when I was in Denmark, like every supermarket has like this little conveyor belt, and so you can just take your little tray of bottles, you put it in, then it just spits out money at you for bringing them back in. You're like, great, now I'll just use this money I made to go and buy my groceries and do that kind of stuff. And it's more money than what it is here for and you can't even do it. I remember as a kid always reading on the back of the cans, like how much is 5 cents a can? I was like, I want to collect these and get the money. And then it's like, no, it's over in Adelaide or something. I was like, God damn it.
It's in Melbourne now.
Oh, it's in Melbourne now?
Yep.
There you go.
Started last year, November.
Oh, well,
yep.
Rowan, past Rowan is very upset with this. As a kid, I was like, let me make some extra money.
But I think that's the challenge, is that it comes from a place of, I suppose, education. Like it's hard to understand all of this because it's so different from state to state, from council to council, from, even shopping centres are different from one another.
Yep.
So there is no consistency across the board. There's no federal drive for any of this sort of stuff. It's all state-based.
I know different, but I had we finally got green waste at our house, and I was like, cool. I think I always feel so bad just dumping stuff in the rubbish. And then for the first few weeks, I was like getting my green. I'm like, they didn't pick it up, and I'm like, oh, this stinks. This is terrible. Mm-hmm. And then there was a big sticker just put on the side of my bin, and it's like, you have it in bags. And I'm like, no, it's the compostable bags. And our council, which again, I feel like it's different from council to council. Our council decided, well, you may be stuffing other things that aren't, compostable or whatever in these bags. So we're not going to allow you to use bags. But then that leads to me inside being like, I've got a little jar thing in the kitchen. Then I'm like, that thing's gross and it stinks. And then there's flies and it's like, but just the difference of it, council to council always being different feels confusing and tough and,
makes it hard, right?
Yeah.
It puts a barrier up that you can't just easily go out and do it in your household.
And I'm still pushing, but it also makes me go, well, I could just throw it in the trash and I'm not dealing with flies, or I'm not dealing with a gross, dirty little tub, or I'm not dealing with a stinking bin out the front. So I'm like, it is that easy for me just to dump it in a bin, but I'm still doing the right thing, but it's a lot more annoying.
When I was living in an apartment, we had the issue where there was no green waste bin at all. We used to use bokashi bins at home, so that's where you ferment your compost, and you can put anything in there, so dairy, meat, doesn't really matter. I used to take it to a community garden every 8 weeks and bury it just with random people I'd met online. I'm like, what is the Tinder of waste disposal?
You want to meet up in a park and bury some?
Congratulations, you matched with Nick Percy.
But that's not easy. Not everyone's going to do that, and I understand that.
Yeah,
pain in the ass.
Well, but we can all probably take a small part of our day out to be able to better manage those things. I had a question for you back on B-Corp certification. Do you think customers the general Joe Blow purchasing a bag of coffee from Veneziano, let's just say, do you think they notice B-Corp certification and think, I will actively make my choice based on that?
Some do, for sure. Some do. Not everyone. So it can't be the only thing that we hang our hat on. We've still got to have a good product. But there's absolutely a segment of the market that are looking for what they call impact-driven businesses, especially younger generations like your Gen Zs. They're pushing everyone across the world to move in this direction.
What do we think of Gen Z? Because I think they get a pretty bad rap in the media. Our generation, I'm a millennial. I'm 30 years old. Am I a millennial? I think I am. Yeah. So we got a pretty bad rap in the media. I don't think Gen Z are that bad. They do the TikTok dancing. I think they're actually quite good.
I think throughout history, it's always that younger generation that is pushing the change, and it's every generation that's been that. I think the difference of why people get annoyed with Gen Z or this or that is there's always a battle between them, and the younger generation, with all the different trends and whatever they're trying to do, they're just trying to separate themselves from the people that they don't want to be. So they're just doing stuff that they can be like, we're a part of this, and you're not. And so that's why it's so embarrassing when you see the millennials trying to like get in on the trends, say this stuff. It's like, that's not aging you down. That's just aging you more. They want to be separated from you.
I just find it so interesting. Like, I mean, what do you expect from a generation that's been given the iPhone? What do you expect from a generation?
I've been bored up living in the pandemic, like locked in a house.
And confronting issues like climate change and, global conflict and stuff like that in a rate we've never really seen before. Like, I think we give Gen Z a bad rap, to be fair.
Yeah.
So, I mean, on to the next thing.
But speaking of the pandemic, now, I don't know if you, was it released this morning, that the new app, the work from home?
Sure
we
was.
released an absolute banger of an episode. Kirk did a whole deep dive into working from home and how it's affected the coffee industry, all those sides of things. But on a different, like larger scale of we're talking about you and your 600 kilogram house roaster, how did it affect the Nomad group coming into the pandemic? Like what changed for you guys?
It changed a little bit about how we do business. It's embraced flexibility, which is good. And that's something that's really, really important to our team. We work from home. I work from home a couple of days a week, which has allowed me to buy a house, 50 Ks out of the city as well, which wouldn't have happened prior to that. But from a business standpoint, it's expanded it. Like we had some, like everyone, we had some challenges during COVID because things turned off overnight. I was doing jobs that weren't mine. I was packing coffee, 5 days a week because I had no one to talk to in the national accounts game.
You were saying as well, like the founders were packing coffee during COVID as well, right? So everyone got hands on.
Absolutely, everyone was. We just wanted to get through it and make sure we stayed together as a group, as a team, survived it, and moved on to keep on growing. But also with that came some diversity. Like we had already a diverse business. We didn't just have one channel that we sold through to, so that helped. And we kind of just doubled down on that a little bit more, so a little bit more online and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So what about retail though? So obviously there's Veneziano who sell coffee to cafes in a wholesale capacity. You sell it online. Then you've got the Nomad Coffee Group, which has a wide portfolio of sort of dealings. What was it like? So, particularly supplying to clients like Audi or something like that. What was there a spike in growth there, sort of thing? You don't have to mention anything specifically, but obviously more people started drinking coffee from home.
No, of course there was a spike. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, and I dare say that's probably caused the need for some of the upgrades. This big roastery that you now operate out of, and it's not just them that you sort of do work for as well. So, if we sort of bring the work from home element to this, how's work from home really changed things in that regard? So there's how you operate in your company. You now work 3 days a week from home, which I think is kind of emblematic and, a good signpost of where this conversation's going. Because a lot of people work from home significantly more, even those in a coffee company.
Well, I also work at a company based in Brisbane as well. So Minor DKL is head office up there. It's not very sustainable to fly up and down every week, in my role. But what it does is it not only gives people the flexibility to buy a house, which, a few of us have bought, a fair whack out of the city because of affordability. You cannot afford to buy in Richmond where we're head office. But also it allows you to attract people that you wouldn't normally be able to chat to. We've learned, we've been able to tap into the people in our network, even down to the guys over in New Zealand as well, and how we manage and work with them. We still travel. We still get into the office. We still have our connection days where we get in, make sure we hang out. We're still a close-knit team. But it's just a case of adding that balance.
And this is precisely kind of where I think things are changing, because obviously we've had this discussion last week and now we're talking about it this week. Coffee is kind of, in my opinion, this is strictly my opinion, you don't have to agree with it. I feel like we're having our blockbuster moment. I said last week, everyone still watches movies, but they don't go to Blockbuster. Everyone still drinks coffee, but they don't necessarily go to a cafe. You and I were talking about a few weeks ago how you barely go to cafes these days. So it's like a widespread thing. And so like coffees, cafes need to kind of, They can be a part of that as well by supplying goods like coffee, by supplying goods like milk. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a place for going out, and there always should be. I hope there is, because it is enjoyable. just means that it puts that extra pressure on the quality. I think Rohan, you were saying on a previous episode, because I've done some research.
Well.
Around cooking from home, and how you were saying how that you can cook better than most of the places that you've gone to recently, which I can relate to from being stuck in an apartment through COVID.
Yeah, and I will just clarify here because that, probably put me in some hot water with some of the managers out there. I just mean when we're looking at like some breakfast things as well, when it's like, I'm going to wait 45 minutes to get some poached eggs on toast or whatever. It's like, yeah, I can do that at home. And, I enjoy sharing that with friends and doing it around that side. And COVID and the pandemic was definitely a time for me where it's like those skills just went through the roof and experimenting with different cooking techniques.
One interesting angle to this as well is that our most kind of viral reel was actually Rohan and I discussing how there are cafes in Australia that say they use a specialty coffee roaster, but actually they will use something like the Aldi blend from the Lazio blend. Now, was that noticed within the Nomad Coffee Group?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
It was shared around. We had a giggle.
Yeah, and
quite enjoyed that.
Do you believe me?
We've heard it before.
Oh, okay.
We have heard this before. We haven't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly haven't seen it. I mean, with the amount of stores, the accessibility, I'm sure it would happen.
There's this idea as well, like you could, in theory, I don't recommend it, and you won't do as good of a job as the conventional way, but you could run a cafe off goods that you buy from the supermarket. You can buy milk there. You can buy reasonably good coffee from a few. The roast days vary in some of them. You could kind of operate a here we go, a couple of old cultures walking past, having a good old time. They're having a gay old time. I like that. But you could really do it. And you were kind of saying to me yesterday you wouldn't recommend it because there's certain. You can elaborate on the point.
Well, I mean, food fraud is the thing. That would be one thing that I'd recommend against saying that you're using something and it being something completely different. Don't do that. But also, you don't get the same, service or the same level of traceability that you would with a direct connection.
There's value in getting your coffee delivered.
Yeah.
There's value in, having a rep that it fixes certain problems and services your machines and all that sort of stuff.
We've all been in sales. We know that there's quite a lot of work that goes on. It's not just a transactional thing.
I tell you, this is completely unrelated, but just an idea I had when I was in university. I always wanted there to be like a place where when you were in university, couldn't afford food out, just speaking of buying stuff from the supermarket, I was like, a place should just open up that just serves like mee goreng, like all the different flavors, and they just have like vats of it because it costs what? From the supermarket, 50 cents a pack of noodles, and just dish that out. $5 tubs, in, out, walk in, get going. So that's one way that I think they should take it from the supermarket.
I've actually heard of Asian supermarkets that do that in Melbourne.
Oh.
Like you can actually go whip up a little instant noodles thing and it's quite cost effective and have it there.
Yeah. Well, you can do the little noodle cup things at like 7-Eleven or whatever, right? Where you just add in the hot water. But just jumping back to the cafes using Aldi, I could see how it's happened because there's definitely been times where when I was working, you run out of something. You're like, crap, we're in service. I need to run down the road to Laurent or whatever and grab a couple loaves of bread because we've run out of what we normally use. You can imagine someone running out of coffee and just being like, crap, jump down to the Aldi and do it. But then the next thing with that is the great price. And they're like, well, we could just grab this a bit more often and maybe we'll be having ourselves a nice little time over here.
Well, I'll give everyone at home a snippet. One of my previous employers did this, and that's how I know. That's how I got onto it. I won't elaborate who. You can jump on my LinkedIn and try and find out. But one of my previous employers did this.
Oh, I'll be excited. I want someone to dive into the DM. Send us who you think it is. Let's find out the goss on this. Now, just like throwing you under the bus with a question, we've got you bought us a lovely little gift here. What have you bought us?
I bought some singles from our roastery in Veneziano.
Yep, nice. So what was that, a Kenyan? I can't see the front of the bag.
We've got a Kenyan and an Ethiopian.
Yeah, nice. Now, out of all the coffees you're making, what's your go-to? What's your favorite?
So, I double down with a milky and a batch brew every morning.
Yep.
I'm to the point where I'm really predictable and boring.
And what are you brewing with?
Well, I'll go to the cafe in Richmond.
Oh.
That's one thing, yeah.
If you're at home, how do you do it?
If I'm at home, I've got my Breville set up. So I've got a little Breville Oracle, which is great unit, big fan. And I do occasionally dust off the W60.
What's a W60?
It is like a V60, but
W60.
Slightly different. Pete Licata had some work in designing it. I know that much.
Mm-hmm.
It's got that sort of vibe.
Just on Ethiopia and Kenya, if I can quickly jump in, a lot of people have been. So there's been a lot of conjecture about the sort of harvest from Ethiopia and Kenya not being as good in the last few years and yada yada yada. And I've heard it crept into this year. I cannot disagree more. I feel like coffee from Kenya and Ethiopia has been so goddamn good this year that it's just, for me, it's just been unbelievable. Agree? Disagree?
I agree.
Have you drunk enough to be able to comment?
Probably not enough to comment.
I agree.
Yeah, well, you guys do a fair bit of Kenyan.
Yeah, we've got the Kenyan Nagutha on that slaps. That's so good. Knock that out every morning. We do a batchy with that. Liam gets around it. Loves the Kenyan. We had a couple of our staffs, a few of our staffs are not as adept, and they ran it through the espresso machine and started making milkies with it. They're like, this coffee's really sour. I'm like, stop making milkies with it.
Yeah.
It's all experimenting over here,
Yeah, we'll do that too. We're getting to the tail end of our podcast here. So we got 2 more segments to go. Now, the first one usually is rapid fire questions, which I don't actually alert you to because we want them to be a bit of a surprise. I've got about 20 questions to ask you in about 1 minute's time. You down for this?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Liam?
Hey, it's just
questions. Let's go.
And your time starts now.
Coffee order.
Flat white batch brew.
Washed or natural?
Washed.
Co-fermented coffees, yes or no?
Yes.
Geisha or Couture?
Couture.
Colombia or Panama?
Colombia.
Filter or espresso?
Filter.
7-Eleven or Coles?
Neither.
Ooh, instant or McDonald's?
Probably McDonald's. Really cheesy.
Beer or wine?
Beer then wine.
Espresso martini or coffee Negroni?
Espresso martini.
Extra points for this. Favorite Bee Gees album?
Don't know any.
Best coffee podcast ever?
Well, this is it, right?
Most underrated coffee venue in Melbourne?
Ooh, I think that was it Omar and the Virtue, Omar.
All right. Favorite sport?
Footy.
Rohan or Kirk?
Both.
Lord of the Rings or Star Wars?
Star Wars, for sure.
Best coffee city outside of Melbourne?
Auckland.
Do you hate Italians as much as Rohan does?
No, I'm not a racist.
Okay. There we go.
Put it on the record that I do not hate Italians.
Just their coffee.
I just think, no.
So you are kidding. You do hate Italians.
No, I love Italians. I've been to Italy like 6 times. I've traveled all up and down, across everywhere. When I stated that they have bad coffee, I went on to elaborate that there's a reason for it and it unifies the country and brings everyone together because it's accessible. And that is the difference in the culture.
Another question I didn't mention there. Xiaolongbao or ravioli?
Xiaolongbao.
Oh, racist. You hate Italians.
Mate, you cannot get anything better than a xiaolongbao.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
So delicious.
That's what I'm saying. I went to Din Tai Fung the other day. Oh my God. I got did the xiaolongbao and then I did just one of the little truffle ones as well. What a treat that is.
Speaking of timeless food classics, and I was thinking about having this as my hot take, but I think I'll just have it as a take. Can we bring back the halal snack pack? Do you remember the halal snack pack?
No,
I don't think there has been anything that's unified Australians more than the Halal Snack Pack Appreciation Society on Facebook.
I'm too old to stomach that.
So we've got a whole bunch of divides in the country right now, and I don't think anything brought. And I truly believe this. I don't think anything kind of brought the Islamic world and Western culture closer together in Australia than the Halal Snack Pack Appreciation Society. It was the perfect bridge between these two groups. And I don't think anything united us more than the Halal Snack Pack Appreciation Society.
What happened to it? Because it was just the biggest thing when every meme was about getting a halal snack pack after a night out and this and that. But I just realized I haven't heard about a halal snack pack in forever.
It's been, maybe it just had its time in the sun phased out, which is a bit of a shame. But to alert some international listeners or people who might not have heard of it before, a halal snacker pack is basically just like a bunch of hot fries, fries essentially, with donor meat just shaved on top of it, with a compilation of sauces, starch and meat, you could say. But it was just
the ultimate like.
Nick's looking at me he's like, oh, I've had one too many of these in my time.
Oh, I'm a little bit older than you. I've had a couple.
Mm-hmm.
They don't look after you like they used to anymore, I find. In terms of internally. My body no like you so much.
Okay. I'm gonna name and shame someone here. Anthony Douglas, previous guest on this podcast, halal snack pack addict. He's an addict.
Oh my God.
I've never met someone
that refined palate just wants to smash down
he's like a world barista champion. He's a very sophisticated guy. He's traveling the world doing all sorts of things coffee-wise. Guilty pleasure, halal snack pack.
I want to see him in the World Halal Snack Pack competition. I want to see him talking about halal snack packs the way he talks about coffee.
I'm considering telling another story that I don't know if I should.
Tell it.
I'm going to tell it. Jimmy Yeoman broke up with his cafe and got a coffee machine, and he fully had an actual breakup. So we all know. Do we know James Yeoman?
I know really well. Yeah.
I don't know why I'm individually just naming and shaming him, but we had a podcast. An event a few weeks ago where I was just having a total random conversation, and Jimmy's kind of like he's got a kind of high-pitched voice. He's like, oh, man, how you going? But that's to give you an example of how he kind of talks. But he was explaining to me that, this is I should have mentioned this in the work from home part. But anyway, he was explaining to me that he got a coffee machine. He's like, I'm so effective at making coffee. I actually went and broke up with my cafe. So he walked down. He told him, "Oh, this is going to be the last time I go and get your coffee. Get my coffee from you because I'm, just got a machine. It's been really nice." He actually went down and broke up with his cafe. Have you heard of that?
The poor barista just behind the thing, just like, cool, bro.
It's on brand for Jimmy though.
100%. But he didn't need to go do it. He could have just disappeared MIA totally.
Was it just was he so well, they're going to be wondering where I am. They're going to be thinking every morning, what happened? I just want to let him know it's not someone else.
It was very considerate of him, but he broke up with his cafe.
He's not going out with someone else. He's going home to self-pleasure with coffee.
He's just purely on the home train. And I just thought, I know for people listening to this, Kirk, why are you mentioning that? But it's I just thought it was the most unique story. And I'm sitting there while he's telling me, very nonchalant, but I'm just thinking deep down, I'm totally mentioning this on the podcast one day.
What was the point of bringing up how you felt he talked? I thought you were going to then go into play out the whole thing and try to be him, but you just dropped it.
He would to put yourself in my shoes. He would be going to his cafe and going, "Oh, sorry, man. I'm
okay, there we go. He did want to bring out the play.
And to be fair, that is his pretty much his lexicon as well.
And he's amazing. And I normally. I don't promote bullying in this way, but seeing that the lights, the limelight's coming off me, I'm just taking my break for a few seconds there and enjoying it.
Well, this is probably a good segue into the greatest segment.
Well, it did just start. It got very spicy with that story. It got very hot in there, and I'm feeling a little flustered because it's time for an extra hot take with 2 sugars.
Well, as I was saying, this is the greatest segment in all of coffee podcastery. I kind of wish I came up with it myself, but Rohan did. So,
the one compliment I get each week that I'm really appreciative of.
Yeah, I just need to remind the listeners and you of that because.
Thank you.
Yeah. But shall we start with Nick and his hot take? You've got a
no pressure.
No pressure. All right. So down the barrel. Tell us what your hot take is.
I'm going to get lynched for this one, but espresso overrated.
Oh. I do hate Italians.
No, just this style.
What? All right, we'll elaborate.
So just in all forms of coffee, I just find that espresso is too much, too intense, too high acid, too much. Give me a filter any day.
This is probably a good time. Do you think the large long black should be done away with and just replaced with filter? I don't get why people order a large long black.
Have you tried one on a more traditional style coffee?
No.
Only way to drink it.
I mean, it's kind of like Americano style, right? I feel like there's that American side where it kind of matches because their drip coffee is going to be more body, stronger flavor, all that kind of thing. So the double shot in a big old cup of water kind of mimics that style of the drip, I feel like. Not for me, but I feel like that's the market there for it. Do you think your statement with espresso is where you look at that? I look at something like Turkish coffee or whatever, and I'm like, that is gnarly. That is too much. But when I hear you say espresso is too much, I'm like, come on now. Very different style of the filter, but I'm all there for it.
Look, it is. Look, that's why it's a hot take, right? But it also comes down to I'm not a huge fan of whiskey. I like things to be a bit more open, a little bit more gentle.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially when you're saying that your tum-tum doesn't do well with the halal snack packs. You're like, I need something gentle on my stomach, not the harsh acidity. So you're not sitting down in the morning with the halal snack pack and a double espresso to get you going?
Not normally, no.
Okay. Well, that's how I start every day. So it's not doing well for the shred fest. Those halal snack packs are where the problem is coming in.
The breakfast of champions.
Yeah.
I'll go next with my hot take with 2 sugars if you don't mind.
Please.
My extra hot take with 2 sugars is Australia, we need to get better at recycling. Which isn't...
I can endorse that.
It's not the hottest take, but you know we're going back to the conversation about how Sweden do their recycling bins. You know, they're probably not model citizens for everything, but you know, on recycling certainly are. And I think, you know, we just get better at just really at putting a chip packet in one bin, a glass bottle in another, and you know, a plastic water bottle there and cardboard there. Not that hard. We can do it.
I'm going to act like an 80-year-old in a cafe right now and come up to you with my coffee and say, that's not hot enough.
Oh, so you want it extra hot?
I want it extra hot I'm getting my extra hot take. No, I think that's completely true. And there's double sides to like the infrastructure and also just people doing it themselves and also just the knowledge. Like there's so much stuff out there about recycling that people don't know. It's like pizza boxes. If that thing's got grease on it or oil from your pizza, you can't recycle it.
Normally okay. That's the thing.
What do you mean?
It depends on how much cheese, how much
oil. So if you get like a pizza place that has like they put down like a sheet of baking paper or whatever and kind of block it, it's fine. But if it's like over 10%, is it?
Oh, there's no hard and fast rule.
Okay.
But that's the other challenge.
Yeah. But if there's like a large amount of like oil, and I've you know, pizza boxes can get pretty gross and pretty grubby. But see, how are you meant to know that if you're telling me like, oh, a little bit's fine? It's like, well, what's the amount? What's the little bit that I am able to do this? Because then aren't you causing more problems putting stuff in there that can't be recycled? And
well, you lower the quality, right? You lower the quality of the product they can then recycle and sell.
Yeah. Is that why my cardboard is always so greasy when I buy it?
Potentially.
Yeah.
What's more greasy, a Domino's pizza or like a wood-fired pizza from, you know, your pizzeria down the road?
Depends on the topping.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm off Domino's pizza forever. I had a bad one a few weeks ago. I was like, oh, damn, why did I do this? This is after like years. I had my first Domino's pizza in some time. Like, damn, nasty.
I don't know if I had it when I was definitely living in the States. Like people would always have it at parties. But is there what's the best like fast food pizza in Australia? Oh, Liam, I've never seen someone lean into the mic so quickly as that.
We've got a connoisseur over here. Used to be Eagle Boys.
I reckon crust is pretty
Crust.
good. Like if you're going for
that
that like quick like chain coffee, I think we have like we're spoiled for beautiful pizza shop, like, you know, all around. But yeah, crust is, you know, you get your peri peri chicken, like sauce on top. It's, you know, it's trash in the best way.
What's the crust at crust like though? I feel like they're like little hard Frisbee discs. Like I haven't had it. I'm just claiming out here. I'm just like, from what I've seen, like the billboards, I'm like,
nothing to write home about. What I want to know is you've done some time in America. What's Papa John's like?
Oh, Papa John's. To be honest, I think that's like, it's weird over there. They have, I didn't have Papa John's because I feel like each state has its own fast food things. Like you can look at maps in America and or like have little pop-ups of what's popular. And a lot of those places won't be in other states. Like Dunkin' Donuts is only East Coast, right? So no one drinks that over like in California and that kind of thing. I'm not sure if there was Papa John's where I was, but I definitely didn't have it. Domino's was going around a lot there. Then there's like Little Caesars, which is kind of like the cheaper, quick option and that kind of thing. And then like In-N-Out Burger, that's only West Coast, right? And then you have like Shake Shack on the East Coast and that kind of thing. There's a big debate there. Both great. I was West Coast, so In-N-Out was the way to go.
Yeah.
Like Five Guys versus In-N-Out. Five Guys is like...
Yeah, Five Guys is one of them, but I think the bigger debate over there is Shake Shack. I think some people would bring up Five Guys, and if you're from like the South, you might bring up like Whataburger, but that's just like everyone like laughs at them and is like, trying to be part of this conversation. That's cute. I'd say In-N-Out Burger might be better, but then Shake Shack fries are way better. Anyway, that's my say.
So yeah, haven't tried Papa John's. Okay.
Yeah. My hot take. Hello, here we go. All right. When it comes to the cafe, the quality of the steamed milk is more important than the actual coffee when you're ordering a milk-based drink.
Ooh.
Because especially if there's like a large amount of milk, if I get a poorly textured one where it's not integrated, no matter how good the coffee is, I'm like, oh, this tastes like garbage. But if you just put a basic shot of espresso in a cup and then beautiful, silky, velvety milk, that's going to make me way more happy.
Interesting that you say that. I think I agree because, you can kind of polish a turd with good milk in a lot of cases. And also there's sometimes there's different kinds of full cream milk as well. There's Jersey cows and Friesian cows, and Jersey cows have a higher
fat content, right?
Higher fat, higher sugar content within milk. So it comes out a bit sweeter, a bit heavier flavor, and it kind of pairs better with a dark roasted coffee, or often you'll need a double shot to be able to make your coffee strong enough. Whereas if it's from a mixed herd of Friesian and Jersey, it's kind of a bit more stable and a bit more versatile as well. Spent some time in the milk game. This is how I know.
I was going to say getting schooled on milk. I love it.
But yes, I totally agree. And to one up you there as well, we use an Uber milk at our cafe. And for whatever reason now, I can really notice when I'm having milk that's not from an Uber milk because there's no additional water added to the milk when you use an Uber milk because they kind of expand and heat milk. And it tastes so much better.
Creamier, yeah.
It's so much better.
Well, I did actually, I did a video where I did testing on this because we have one of the Nanofoamer Pros here, which is a little automatic frothing machine that froths just like cafe quality milk. But what I noticed was I started testing, and all machines are different from home to commercial to that. It's different grams, but you can get anywhere from 20 grams of water added into your milk when you just steam on a machine. So when you don't have it, there is a lot more creaminess and a lot more richness when you don't add water into that mix.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, that just about wraps up the show for today. Nick, I have to really personally thank you for all your time in preparing for this and taking me on a little excursion yesterday, coming and spending your time here and being so having such a contribution to the podcast as well.
Yeah, and I'd personally like to thank you for inviting me out. I had a great time there. Didn't get a call, just whatever. Just get Kirk saying, hey, I'm here. This is great. So we've got a bit of beef here and we'll have to carry that on in. No, thank you so much for coming in. It was a pleasure. It was so insightful. Love the stuff that you're doing with the Nomad group and that. It's super respectful, and I think a lot of the companies should look into these elements of what they can be doing better. And all of us as people should just look in the mirror and say, recycle properly.
Recycle properly. But it's an interesting sort of position for people that are largely into specialty to look upon bigger companies and what they're doing from a sustainability standpoint and kind of how that filters down. But yeah, thank you again for being so generous with your time.
No, thanks for having me,
Have
guys.
you got any concluding remarks that you want to say before you go?
Not really. I think just some advice. People get concerned. People get worried about, where do I start? Or what if I don't do it right? It's just, if you are making the intent to do things better, you're doing more than most. So that's my closing statement is, doing something is better than nothing.
Yeah, that's a warm take. I'll take that.
Warm take.
Well, thank you again, everybody, for tuning into the It's Just Coffee podcast. Where do we find us on email?
Hit us up on all the socials. We're on TikTok. We're on Instagram. You can find us on YouTube. We've hosted it on Golden Brown. If you want to see any of our beautiful faces in video format, chuck that in the background while you're doing some work. Also, you can hit us up at email at hello@itsjustcoffeepod.com. Send us in your questions, send us in your hot takes, anything you'd like to know, any guests you'd like to see us have. As I said, we're going to start planning a little event, I reckon, for the end of the year. I think it'd be great to host a little something down there. We can have a bunch of the coffee community and the extended coffee community, the home baristas, or just coffee lovers who just walk into a cafe and say, hey, this isn't as good as the LD blend. And on that note, we'll say goodbye.
Thank you.